Welcome to the Gritty Gospel Podcast, where we are unveiling the gospel truth in the grittiest moments of life.
All right, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Again, I want to thank you for coming and joining me. And today we are going to talk about something it's just been on my heart this whole year, really, it being an election year. And it's like, what is my place? What should I be doing in this time where it's like, man, there's so much going on. There's so many conversations and controversy about who we should vote for. Are we going to be for Donald Trump? Or are we going to be for Kamala? And the reality is, we need to be voting our values. It's not so much about the person, but it's about the values. So as a Christian, as a person who believes in Jesus, as a person who says, hey, you know what, I'm going to pick up my cross and I'm going to follow in his footsteps. What do I do when you have two imperfect beings who I'm supposed to cast a vote for, right? Or should I just sit out and not even be involved, right? Should I just say, God, take care of it and not even get involved in the game? Well, I personally don't believe that is the route that we should take. Why should we vote? Why should we vote as a Christian? So one of the verses that I'm going to refer to is Romans 13:1 through 2. And it says, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. So, if you want to take that verbatim, I think there would be an argument that, well, this is saying that you shouldn't go against the authorities in any way, shape, or form. And I'm here to say that that's not exactly what it's saying. I mean, because even Jesus himself went against the authorities when those authorities were doing wrong, right? When they were hypocrites that were basically destroying their culture, when they were full of legalism, when they were full of all of these things that were detrimental to the people, Jesus stood up against that. What this verse really emphasizes is the importance of participating in governments as authority is ordained by God. And the way that we have an opportunity to do that is through two ways. One, the personal lives in which we live need to be lived in a way that follows Christ. And by doing that, we will be the salt of the earth. We will bring flavor. Where there is death and destruction, we will be love and light and life through our personal conduct. But then we are given the opportunity to influence the culture through our vote. And so we need to be looking at, each candidate and what are they saying they are going to do. And when we have to essentially choose the lesser of two evils, right? Because we are all evil beings in the sense that we were born into sin and iniquity. So we got to do something about that. We have to decide, okay, how are we going to try to work to get better every day? And one of them is exercising our right to vote. Now, some would say, well, if both of the candidates are trash, then I'm better not to vote for any. But I would argue that if you are in this particular election aware of the issues, you would disagree. Did I say that right? I would argue, though, that if you are paying attention to the issues, you would find that there's a clear distinction and that there are several points that we not only should be aware of, but we should advocate for if we're going to call ourselves believers and advocates for Christ. I'll get to that in a moment. Second verse, 2 Timothy 2:1 through 2 says, I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercessory, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings, and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all goodness and holiness. So essentially, Christians are called to pray for our leaders and for those who are in authority. And in addition to that, I believe we can extend that to voting for those who align with biblical values, right? So that's where it comes down to, what is each candidate really promoting? What do the principles and precepts of the Bible teach us that we should be advocating for and protecting? And that's really kind of the next thing. So, I picked two topics because I don't want this to be too long, but I want to talk about the economy. I think that's one that is clearly important because, what we are doing with our money as a nation shows where our heart is as a nation. And some of the things that bother me about where our money is going is to funding war. And in the previous verse, it talked about that, our goal is that we can live peacefully and quiet lives. Well, we're funding two wars right now in one way or the other. And however you feel about it, whether you feel like it's right or wrong, I can tell you this much. There's some things that are really disturbing. When it comes to, Hamas versus Israel, we're paying for both sides of that war, and multitudes of innocent people are dying. And the candidate who was in office where we had no wars for the first time in my lifetime was President Trump. So if he could duplicate that again, I'd be all for that. Plus, we would be harnessing more of our financial power to be able to help our citizens like we were unable to do when, the hurricanes hit this year in the hurricane season of 2024. Just logical, seems pretty straight across the board for me. But, you tell me how you think about it in the comments. Proverbs 21:5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty." And I think we are moving quickly into more and more poverty, as you can see what's going on with inflation if you're paying attention. And those were historically low under Trump versus our current administration, both Biden and Harris, and also the other Republican presidents, Republican and Democratic presidents that came before him. So if you're looking at just the numbers, that's a win for President Trump, in my opinion. But essentially what this verse is saying is that it encourages us to be, responsible with our economic planning and stewardship, which, I think is pretty doggone important, seeing as so many people are in debt. So many people seem to be struggling with this thing. When I look at our education system, we're taught a lot of things, but we're not taught about how to manage money. We're not taught about how to build wealth. We're not taught about, why it's important to stay out of debt. We're not taught about the differences between good debt and bad debt. So there's a lot of issues that around money that we struggle with. And I think that I would much rather learn from a businessman who has built $1 billion business over his lifetime, has acquired his wealth through the plans of a diligent business model in real estate. And then I have to ask myself, well, what business has Biden ever built? Nothing. So how is he a multimillionaire? It's very telling that these people he's been in office as long as Trump has been a business person. Both of them are multi-billionaires or multi-millionaires. Trump is a billionaire. One's built a business. Just in Vegas last weekend, saw Trump Tower. Every time I go down to Miami, love it, see his buildings. I know it's there. I've seen it with my own two eyes. What business has Biden built? And if he hasn't gotten that because he's been in public service, then where does the government get its money from? Us. I don't remember hiring Biden for anything. That's all I'm going to say. Matthew 25:14-13 says, and this is the parable of the talents. This parable teaches about being good stewards of our resources that God has entrusted us with, including our financial resources. Again, it's just kind of furthering the point that if there's one person who has done it, if you look at the numbers as it relates to inflation alone, and of course a slew of different products and services and the cost of things when Trump was in office versus when Biden has been in office, Harris has been in office, it's night and day, largely in favor of the American people through the policies that Donald Trump had put in place. Now, something that's very important to me, if you look at my feed and my stories, I'm highly against abortion. I don't understand, what it is to be able to kill a baby. I think that's cowardly, and I understand that there are a multitude of opinions on this whole thing, and I understand that when you look at a woman's life, that it might be in danger, that could be some very difficult choices. I want to tell you that the main issue that we're dealing with this abortion issue is not a woman's health, okay? It is not a woman's health. It is simply a culture that seeks to want to do whatever it wants to do without reaping the consequences. We have a promiscuous society where abortion is used as birth control. It is rarely incest or rape or a lot of the things that, and to call it reproductive care is kind of a sickening, because it's not about caring about anything. If you've ever seen how abortions are performed, there's no care. It's simply ripping a body of a baby into pieces. It's a very difficult thing to be able to understand that we have been duped into believing that this is care for humanity, and that that women largely have been manipulated into believing that this is something that they should champion. Psalms 139:13-16 says, "For you created my innermost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praised you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." And Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." This is very important to me because you're going to have, right now, we have a lot of conversation about when does life start, blah, 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 blah. And I say it like that because believers, as believers, God has told you, I formed you in the womb and I knew you before you were born. That means that you had an identity, a purpose, and a plan for your life. God ordained before you ever, all of us, before any of us were ever born. And either you with it or you're not. But the bottom line is, if you call yourself a believer and a follower of Christ, it is what it is. Lastly, I think, the Christian perspective on immigration, which is it's a tough one for me because, my family on one side was an immigrant, and ultimately, my lineage is from Africa. We all understand, what has happened with slavery when we were ripped from our homeland and brought here. Of course, we understand the history of this nation as it relates to the natives and how they were kicked out of their lands. And all of those things are important, and it's a very difficult discussion to be able to have. But ultimately, the reality is that we're supposed to care for one another. We're supposed to love one another. But there are also laws. There are also ways of doing just that as it relates to having a country that is going to be safe and secure. And that's something that we really need to address. Matthew 25:35 says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. And I was a stranger, and you invited me in." So here's my my stance on where we are with the people who are here, who have been manipulated, coerced, trafficked, the innocent ones, the good people who are caught up in a bad situation. We need to care for them. Maybe we should take that money that we're utilizing to fund wars, and we should just simply fund helping those people who are here. The mothers, the fathers, the children who are fleeing those war-torn countries. And yes, we have to have a remedy, because it's not enough just to say, hey, we're going to take care of you because you're here. You broke the law, but these are human beings. We got to find a way to make it right without them paying the ultimate price of being alienated or perhaps even sent back to where they came from. I think there is some nuance there that is far beyond where I'm at with it, but I would definitely like to discuss it, because I don't like the idea of throwing them to the wayside. Now, if you're a criminal and you've come here illegally, I think they just need to be deported. That's just where I'm at with it. If you have already caused havoc, and if you have already destroyed people's lives in another country, you need to go back to that country and you need to pay your due. But we need to find a solution for those who are here. I don't think it's, for me, just personally, we just throw them away because the scriptures ask us to be compassionate. It just highlights that we are to care for strangers who are marginalized, and we are to make sure that our policies, which need to change, have compassion weaved into them. That's the bottom line. And that's a discussion that isn't going to be solved by me, but that is an approach that we need to have because compassion is the key. If a child is ripped from where they are from and they find themselves here in essentially the land of milk and honey, we should do everything we can to find a way for them to be able to be here, to understand and learn the values that we hold dear, and to essentially help them become the best version of themselves they can be, because that's the American way, in my opinion. Leviticus 19:34 says, "The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." Essentially, this is saying that we're to advocate for a fair and just treatment of the immigrants, reflecting God's love. And that's really what it is. I think for some people, it's going to be you have to go. And for some, we should provide a way for them to stay. And for some, they just got to get the heck up on out of here, because if you're killing our citizens and you're destroying, the very fabric of what we are about, if you're a terrorist or you have ill will for not just this country, but for any human being on the planet, you need to be dealt with. All in all, that's really just what I wanted to put in my 2 cents, is that, we need to kind of look at all of the issues. We need to look at the policies. We need to draw a conclusion. We need to then exercise our right to vote, because this is our civic duty. We have a responsibility. It's not simply just like, I don't like either party. I'm not, as an American, especially when so many of us had ancestors who fought for the right to have a voice in the fight. We should exercise it. We should do so with love and compassion. You ain't got to go and even tell anybody about who you want to vote for. You don't have to do anything like a podcast where you got to go and give your opinion on the matter. But you do have the responsibility to make sure that you do your due diligence. You look at the facts. You look at the context of the facts. You look at the policies, because policies shape culture. And ultimately, that will help you make the decision on which candidate is best for you to support. That's my 2 cents. I want to thank you for taking a moment to listen to it. I hope that you vote. I highly encourage you to do it. And I hope that you check me on the next podcast.